Wisden are proud to partner with RIVERSTONE Living for our Ashes Daily podcast. From beautiful London apartments to 5-star service and a thriving community. Think the Four Seasons meets Soho House. I visited their Fulham residence last test with Phil, and it's quite the place. To be honest, I didn't know that places like that existed, and even when I found out about them, I didn't know there would be anything like that. From the facilities, the golf simulator, cinema, pool and restaurant, to the events that are put on for the residents. They recently had Graham Gooch over for a chat. There is something for everyone, so if you're over 65 or have a relative who is, head to riverstoneliving.com to find out more and get in touch with them for a tour today. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Ashes Daily Podcast. Australia are miles ahead in Adelaide. After putting on 45 runs for the final 2 wickets this morning, they've kept England to 213 for 8 at the close, and that's after an unbeaten 45-run stand for the 9th wicket between Stokes and Archer. The visitors trail by 158, their Ashes dream hanging on by a thread. I'm Yaz Ron, and with me today is Phil Walker. It's a great listener questions and contributions this morning. Let's start with Jolie. Has Phil given up only going on the daily pod on good days, as he has now realised that would mean we would never hear from him again if he did?
We're only 140 behind. These two looked immovable in the final session. It's all on, lads. Don't worry about it.
Steve on the Discord about half an hour ago just said, morning everyone, fucking dismal news to wake up to. It's actually fallen below my already very low expectations. And then JR says, which is worse, 2013, 2017, 21 or this? And then Guy asks, how bad are England and how good are Australia? Phil, let's start there. It feels like a missed opportunity for England. It was hot, it was flat, and Stokes and Archer showed at the end of the day just how hard it can be to create wicket-taking opportunities with the old ball. And once again, most of England's batters didn't even get the privilege of facing it.
Yeah, we can really get stuck into it now. But just as a precursor, I texted you 10 minutes before the start. We haven't spoken in a week or so yet, as I feel bereft. And I simply said, dreading this, to which you said, yep, absolutely. And to say that our expectations were modest would be to overplay it, I think, really. The rhythms of this series have been so off that it felt almost implausible to see that they would win this day, you know. Every marginal goes against them. Their confidence is on the floor. There's at least 2 players playing for their careers, and one of them may have arguably played himself out of a future, certainly an immediate future. All the little bits went away from them. The nicks, you know, they happen. You know, Brook played very nicely and gets a good one. And of course it carries, and of course he feathers it. There's obviously a bit of a brouhaha in the final session as well. More snicko bullshit. And in the midst of it was this kind of like performative rope-a-dope by the captain. A fascinating, almost sort of silent protest on his part. Which we can really get into. The psychology behind that innings was fascinating to me. But yeah, look, you wash it all up and the Ashes are done. They are done. They were done before this game. You don't come back from 2-0 down with 3 to play. Not in Australia, hardly yet. Well, literally not in Australia ever. And in the Ashes contest, I think only once in its history. So you don't come back from that, especially when you have an inferior side, which is playing progressively less convincing cricket with each day that passes, with 1 or 2 personal exceptions. But look, overall, it's been one of those days that you chalk up and you remember, because as everyone was saying and pounding this point almost like monomaniacally, just every sentence was, it's hot and it's flat and it's hot and it's flat, and now is the time. But if you misplay your hands, as they did so drastically at Perth, And they had moments as well at Brisbane, don't forget as well. If you misplay your hand so badly across the first 40% of a series, then there's no leeway. There's no allowance for a bad session. You have to play kind of all or nothing cricket for the rest of that series. And today was like a kind of an agonizing slow death. And it was hard to watch, and it would be hard for the folks to wake up to as well, who made the wise decision to get some sleep. But yeah, this one has been pretty hard to take, actually. I have to say, it's been a very challenging watch. And tell me about the Stokes innings. Yes, tell me about your impressions of the Stokes innings. 45 not out, 160 odd balls, something like that. And that, combined with what happened at Brisbane, is a fascinating statement almost on his own. He's making a comment on his own culture. It's fascinating.
So he's not
slightly alarmed.
He's not quite there yet, but if he gets to 50, it will mean that the two slowest 50s in the Bazball era are Stokes in these back-to-back innings this series. For me, this is a guy who's struggled for rhythm with the bat for years. Probably since 2022, he's been short of his best with the bat. There have been moments. He got 100 against India in the summer just gone, but on a particularly flat pitch against a not particularly strong India bowling attack. He scores that extraordinary 100 at Lords in 2023. That's 2.5 years ago now, but also that wasn't scored in usual circumstances. He's got a poor head-to-head record against Lyon. He's got a poor head-to-head record against Stark. He was just hanging in there, I think, and showed admirable discipline and also an admirable awareness of his current strengths and weaknesses. We've often said that he communicates his game plan through his own batting. He did it in the first Bazball summer in 2022. I think there's an element of that here as well. But watching it, my question was, are England a side with the technical capability to absorb pressure against bowling sides? Today they scored at basically threes all day. Most of the top 7 got out defending. When they've been successful, and they've not always been successful, they've generally been so by being aggressive. Their amazing fourth innings run chases that they've had several of over the last few years. But also when they've been behind in games and lost wickets early on. I go back to that tour of New Zealand last year where they often found themselves 3 or 4 wickets down early. The way they got out of those holes was taking New Zealand on. And Australia are better than New Zealand, but this England side doesn't have muscle memory of keeping it tight, not giving anything away and batting really long periods of time. And I just wonder, Stokes has got the defensive game for it. Root has. I know it didn't work for him today. But does anyone else? I thought Alistair Cook's analysis of Ben Duckett's dismissal was actually the most interesting. Brilliant ball from Lyon, bowling around the wicket, bit of turn, takes the top of off stump. It is a really good ball. And then Cook says, yeah, it's a good ball, but it's not a crazy good ball. And he says that Duckett is basically so scared of being out LBW to the off spinner that he's very leg side of the ball, more leg side of the ball than a left-hander would normally be to an off spinner, which makes him vulnerable to exactly that delivery. And Ben Duckett is someone who's had immense success attacking spin. I don't think he's got a particularly good game defending against spin. And I feel like England at the moment are in a bit of a muddle where they're trying to do something, and I'm not sure if that many of their players in their top 7 are actually capable of it.
Yeah, no doubt. But this is a deliberate ploy. They've selected certain players for their qualities as counterpunchers. And when you come up against a bowling attack that you can't really dominate at any point because they are so relentless, then it becomes exposed. And what Stokes has shown today is the necessary versatility and adaptability that you need if you're going to be a really good player. Brooke as well showed it. And that was a very interesting innings to watch as well. It was painstaking and quite pained on his part, but I thought he played very, very well. And, you know, there can be no complaints with the ball that he got. But again, you know, he is a player who is obviously world class, but he as well is fixating on technique, trying to find a way to find a kind of a balance between his instincts and the absolute necessity of the match situation. But too often in the last couple of years, we've seen theory overtake good sense and practice, and the two opening bats have been selected with a specific reason in mind, and for all that they have virtues and that they work well and complement each other well together, you see it exposed at times, and Duckett today, as we've seen throughout the series, in one respect, he is immune from criticism because he's not played any kind of Bazballian mad shots, not tried to take on a man at deep square and got caught in the outer. But on the other, he's nicked off while rooted to the crease against a handful of decent deliveries. He's got one or two real pearlers, in fairness, against Stark in particular, but he's also been undone by the kinds of deliveries that you would assume or you would expect a top-class opening bat in a high-end series such as this to be able to deal with. And I thought Cook was very, very good on that. And it was interesting for me to listen to it because I'd sensed the same thing. There are balls that are unplayable from finger spinners, and then there are balls like that. And it was telling to have Cook on commentary, actually, because he made a career out of finding a way to smother the right arm finger spinners from round the wicket. And it never looked particularly pretty. Obviously, he had the advantage that Duckett doesn't have in that he's bigger and that he could reach out and smother it a little bit more easily. But he found a way to do it. And Duckett today, he was exposed. Technically, he was exposed by that one delivery. And you can see that his balance is falling away to the leg side as well. And playing in the end with half a bat rather than trying to play with the inside of his bat because as you say, he's so nervous about the LB that he's kind of playing out away from his body. And you have to be able to deal with that delivery as a top class opening bat. But then he would say himself in lighter moments, right, where the pressure has not really been brought to bear on his shoulders, because as we know, there's Test cricket against everyone else, and there's Test cricket against Australia. He will say, "Well, my best defensive shot is the reverse sweep." And again, hubris alert, sure, but he said that with a straight face. But the game situation, after losing two quick ones, required him to play in a certain way, and he was found wanting, unfortunately.
I also thought today was the starkest illustration yet of the huge gap between the bowling attacks. There was a point today where England were 94 for 4, which was what Australia were on yesterday, and it was so easy for Australia comparatively to England to score runs and get themselves out of that situation. The standout moment for Lyon today was taking those 2 wickets in his first over, but in the afternoon session when Brook and Stokes were going quite nicely, Lyon bowls a spell of 10 overs, 10 wicketless overs for 19 runs. He allowed the seamers to rotate around him. The seamers never had to bowl maximum 4 over spells. They were fresh. Starks' speeds in the final session were actually as quick as we'd seen him at any point this series. All of them, including Green, were really threatening. They didn't bowl bad balls. There is such a big gap between the two bowling attacks, and actually such a big gap between this bowling attack and any bowling attack that England have come across over the last couple of years. Another thing
sorry, and on that, you're absolutely right. But while I'm loath to put the boot in on the management too hard, because I do overall tend to fall down on the side that players have a degree of responsibility that can too easily get folded in to criticisms of management as if they are victims of the excesses of management. And I hold back from that. I rode back from that. But the selection of the squad itself is being exposed, I would say. To go into this series having blithely, brazenly said, well, spin ain't going to play a part, folks, as they said before the first Test match. And quite a few wise old owls out there, Ricky Ponting being one of them, said, you got to play a spinner in Australia. And to go into Adelaide, and it's already turning quite nicely as well. All right, slowly, but it's still turning. And as it did, in fact, for Will Jacks a little bit yesterday. But to go into Adelaide with one part-time spinner is a spectacular example of kind of muddled thinking, let's say. And to have such a threadbare seam attack now, and a kind of homogenous seam attack as well, despite the fact that their pitches are quite variable, and losing Mark Wood makes you feel like this is a very threadbare bowling battery attack. And then to look at the batting as well, and to have, well, one lad waiting in the wings, notoriously waiting in the wings, having not picked up a bat in anger, say for 3 or 4 days at the Oval in early September. For any great value or point, certainly in important cricket, big cricket, since he averaged 50 in England's best away series win for 2 years. And that happened 12 months ago. And he's carrying drinks, wearing a nice fluorescent bib, not sure if he's coming or going. So while I will defend the ethos behind this whole grand experiment broadly, I think some of the minutiae, some of the detail has been found wanting here, really. And the story of Shoaib Bashir becomes particularly stark, I think, in the context of this game in particular. Nathan Lyon will win Australia the game at some point on Friday night, Saturday morning. No doubt he will win it. He'll win it for them. And for Will Jacks to have an impact tomorrow, he'll have to play out of his boots and perform in a way that I don't think anyone really expects him to be able to. And when you consider the temperatures and the surface and what's to come as well at Sydney, I know it doesn't turn quite as square as it used to, but it still will do. It's extraordinary, really, that we've got to this point, and that you have, as you say, experience back home look, Jack Leach and Liam Dawson are not geniuses, but they will have taken wickets on this track. And Shoaib Bashir, however badly he may have gone in recent times, and however much they may have bottled it around him, he's a young kid learning his way and all the rest of it. But he would have stood a chance of taking some wickets on this track as well. But no doubt they've left a lot of experience and pedigree at home. And you have to ask yourself why. The squad, I think, is 15 strong. I remember we had this conversation about this before the squad was named. And I thought, well, you have to take Jordan Cox as a reserve keeper stroke middle order bat. And you have to take another spinner as well to give competition for Bashir. And if one is outperforming the other, then you go with him. It was a peculiarly streamlined slim squad in the first place, I thought, and it's being exposed all the more so now.
Yeah, no, 100%. When Jacks was,
do you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
Oh, I think everyone said when the squad was announced, it's peculiarly streamlined.
I didn't get that sense though.
No, I think it was. I mean, when we were talking about it, I remember we were trying to understand the Will Jacks selection, and I think it made quite a lot of sense as an actual Stokes replacement. If Stokes goes down, how do you compensate for the loss of your star all-rounder? Well, bring in Jacks for Stokes and play the extra seamer. That's the way you do it. I didn't think Jacks would just be the number 2, potentially number 1 spin bowler. And on the broader question, I think maybe not for today, but I think there's a conversation about England made a very bold decision at the start of the 2024 summer to move on from a lot of players who are older, James Anderson being the oldest. I'm not saying that England should have persisted with Anderson. He'd have been 43 had he gone on this tour. But players like Jack Leach, players like Ollie Robinson, players like Johnny Bairstow. Bairstow had one underwhelming tour under Stokes and McCullum and was let go of. Australia are older than England would have been had they picked those guys, and I think their inexperience is showing. We talked a lot before the series about how important top order runs were, not just for the runs themselves, but also protecting the guys below them in the order. Joe Root has now come to the crease inside the first 10 overs in all 3 first innings. Crawley has 3 single-figure scores out of 5. Duckett is averaging 18. Ollie Pope averaging 21. That Pope dismissal was an absolute gift. Nathan Lyon coming back into the side under a bit of pressure, He's up and running, 3 balls in. Pope flicking a ball that's on a 7th, 8th, 9th stump line, trying to flick it through mid wicket. It's such a low percentage shot. Is he playing for his Test career in the second innings?
Oh, no doubt about it. It felt like a last wheeze, really, almost a surrender shot. It's baffling what's happened to him. He's played 63 or 4 Test matches, I think, and he's made 9 Test hundreds, but a couple of them are gimme hundreds, if we're being brutally honest. So a turnout of 700s across 60 odd games, if you take out Zimbabwe and Ireland. And that is a bafflingly modest return for a player of his ability. And a player who we were all understandably and with good reason excited about. It wasn't just us, it was the whole of English cricket, right? Joe Root was excited about him. Ben Stokes was excited about him. It felt like the right call to promote him in this setup and to give him a run in a key position where you need charisma and presence and real deep-seated belief. And those necessary traits appear to have just been eroded, like almost month by month, to the point that we get at now, where the lad doesn't seem like he knows which way to turn. And the shot he played today was, with respect, it was a Sunday afternoon shot. I've got out like that loads of times, unsure whether to block it, unsure whether to sort of try and punch it up to mid long on, and you end up doing everything and nothing all at once and just spooning up a catch. It felt like a surrender shot, really, a shot of a player whose brain is so addled that he doesn't quite know how to function in the most basic terms, really. You know, this was as innocuous a delivery as you can get. He'd already looked nervy and skittish beforehand. He only faced 10 balls, I think it was. And there was that inevitability about it, unfortunately. What is so disappointing and sad for him is that it seems like a long time ago now, but you know, when we chatted after day 1 of the whole series, he made 46 on that first afternoon or first morning. He looked fabulous. He looked really good. He looked still at the crease. He looked composed. He got pinned on the foot again because that's his kryptonite delivery as he falls over and the head falls and he's slightly skew whiff in his technique, unfortunately, because of where the bat comes up and whatnot. But for a couple of hours, he looked fabulous. Jason Gillespie said it on commentary today. He said he looked world class for those 2 innings, in fact, because he played okay in the second innings as well. But as we know, his career follows this weird pattern of diminishing returns the more he runs on and through a series. And you saw a horror show, really, in Brisbane, in fairness. You know, Harry Brook copped a lot of flack, and fair enough. But Ollie Pope's 2 knocks were almost worse, certainly on a par. And what we saw today was agony for him. And my heart goes out to him because you saw how devastated he was when he dragged himself off. But barring something notable in the second innings, like a really good 70, he needs at least a score of note, or else for his own sanity, they need to pull him out, I think. And again, it exposes the paucity of their planning that we'll have a lad, the only kid standing to replace him will have come in without any cricket and still without a first-class 100 under his name.
Yeah, so sometimes you can end an innings and you've only done one thing that's wrong, right? So I think like Brook today, for his 45 or whatever it was, there was barely a false stroke in that innings until the ball he gets out. Pope, as you say, only faced 10 balls, but was in all sorts of bother. Struck on the glove early on by Boland, and there was also 2 balls before he was out. There's a horrible loose drive to one that comes into him from Boland, and it was a wild shot, and it was almost as if there'd just been 2 balls that he'd respected in a row, and he needed to put some pressure back on. And Matt Roller wrote a really good piece on Pope this morning, and he wrote, Pope has spent the last 3.5 years being encouraged to play his natural game, but is yet to discover what that looks like. Pope has won enough caps to be considered a senior player, but bats with the naivety of a rookie. Just some stats on Pope. He averages 28 across his last 24 World Test Championship innings. He averages 25 over his last 7 Test matches. He averages 17 against Australia. And it feels like, despite being ever-present basically under Stokes and McCullum, we are exactly where we were 4 years ago on the last Ashes tour. And on Bethel, I know that people mock the idea and the fact that England's spare batter is a guy who's not got a first-class 100, and that is an objectively mad situation. But I do think England have fumbled the Bethel situation. As you said, 1 year ago, he averages 52 at number 3 in England's best series result in the last 3 years. He was basically always coming in the first 5 overs, because Crawley had a stinker of a series, against a really good New Zealand attack led by Matt Henry and Will O'Rourke. In that 3-test series, he passes 53 times, something that Pope has only done once in the 4 years he's had that role. There are understandable reasons why at certain points they've stuck by Pope. Pope gets that 100 at Headingley that makes it more difficult for them. But I think if you zoom out, they have not used the last year well. And I think it's similar to the Bashir situation, where a lot of people can see an obvious problem and they've come to the realization too late that there is a problem.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'd add. I want to ask you a question actually on Ollie Pope. A narrative has been developed in recent times that he's a victim of muddled thinking and mixed messages and so on. Where do you stand on this idea that if he'd been given a so-called clearer role with more clarity, that he would have flourished more effectively?
I think, again, going back to that New Zealand series, I think he's a more natural number 6, number 7. He always has been. I think there is something to be said about batters not necessarily developing in this side and not adding anything to their game. I don't know that. I don't think that necessarily means that Stokes and McCullum need to be blamed for Pope not going up a level. But equally, I don't think he's got better over a very long time. And I suppose a lot of faith has been shown to players who haven't really shown much back. And it's not really clear what the management have seen in Pope. Like, I don't know. It confuses me a little bit because there haven't really been many moments in the last 2 years that have made me or most people think that Pope has turned the corner against better bowling attacks. Yeah, that's probably where I stand. We're going to come to it. There's a question about McCullum and how his approach might work less well for players with less experience. But we'll come to that in the after show. And just the final thing I wanted to say for today's daily, just a very good day for Jofra Archer. He took the final 2 Australia wickets to finish with his first Test fifer since 2019. He now has 30 wickets at 20 in the Ashes. 30 wickets at 22 in the Ashes. And the last England seamer to take more Ashes wickets at a lower average was SF Barnes before World War One. And he scores a very, very handy 29 not out with the bat to reduce the lead to what it is.
Yeah, he must be thrilled to have spent 3 or 4 years trying to get back into Test cricket. He must be absolutely delighted with his life choices. Yeah, look, it's a ray of light for sure. He was magnificent yesterday in particular, and he mopped up the tail this morning. It's a really, really heartening thing to see him. And look, perhaps there are some shoots of optimism. You know, mad to say it, I guess, but in 18 months' time they play this thing again, and this team is peculiarly unbalanced and uneven. But in some respects, it's very, very raw. There's very few cricketers there's quite a number of cricketers in this team that haven't played that much big cricket and certainly haven't played any Ashes cricket. So Josh Tongue will be better for this experience. Jofra Archer gets stronger with each week. Even someone like Duckett, who you feel like has been around a long time. It's the first time he's played in Australia, so in Test cricket. So just going back to the Bethel thing before we finish off on this bit, if I'm picking the team, he bats at 3 for the next 12 Test matches. So that's my position on it. Unless Pope does something remarkable in the second innings, and if he does, then fair play to him. And I'd love to see it, by the way. But if the trajectory goes as it appears to go, then I'd bring him in and bat him 3 for the next 10, 12 Test matches. And the reason why I would do it is because I think he has the technique to survive against really good high-class new ball bowling, as we saw last year. But crucially, he has the minerals, he has the balls, he has that extra something, that special quality that you need, and which is, I think, notably, alarmingly absent in this dressing room more generally. And if you're trying to really understand what Stokes was saying in a state of shock after Brisbane, I think he's looking around his dressing room, and he's complicit here because he's created this thing, but he's looking around his dressing room and he's realizing that it's made up of a number of truly introverted characters who are almost kind of attractively beset by self-doubt, by a kind of self-effacing kind of approach to themselves and to the game, which might make them quite nice characters, perhaps, but it doesn't make you a hard-nosed international sports person. They are in awe of Stokes. They revere Stokes to an uncomfortable degree. And if you look at Australia's dressing room, they are full of outgoing characters. And I know this might sound a bit simplistic, but this is important. When you're trying to overcome all this history and trying to weather the media on a day-to-day basis and the vagaries of your own form and the gremlins in your own brain. Cook was talking about walking around with your dismissals in your head when you're in Australia. Every day you're carrying your dismissals around with you. You're tossing and turning at night, trying to work out why that one's got you, why this bowler's got the wood over you, and so on. You're trying to get over so much out there. And you need to have a certain kind of character. You look at the 10-11 team, they're made up of like type A alpha personalities. Now, you can take that or leave that in real life. When you're playing against Australia, they're quite useful characteristics to have. The broad character is quite a useful thing to have. How many of these characters exist in this team? I don't know. Not too many by the looks of it. And it becomes exposed, I think, under the pressure.
Absolutely. Thanks to RIVERSTONE for supporting the Ashes Daily. Luxury London living that keeps you independent, inspired and connected. If you don't feel like slowing down but enjoying more of life, head to www.riverstoneliving.com and get in touch with them for a tour today. If you want...
Are they going to invite us back, yes?
I hope so.
Now we're almost 3-0 down after 3.
We need something to look forward to. If you want more from me and Phil, we'll be on the after show over on the Wisdom Patreon channel to talk about Snicko's Ashes, your questions and more.